Hi, this is Dr. Michelle Robin with Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. And I believe if you'll change one thing a month, one thing for the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. And hey, welcome back to Small Changes, Big Shifts, creating and building rhythm and resilience. So this is the first time we've actually gone live on Facebook with this show. It's been an amazing 60 days. Hard to believe we're well into 60 days of COVID-19. And then we have some other interesting things happening on our planet today. So what a perfect guest to start. James, you may not know this. I've been doing this show for 7 years. This is the first time that we've gone Facebook Live doing the show with you. And so thank you so much for saying yes. When I reached out to you, my friend Chris Wittenberg from Be Good to People sent me your link and said, hey, you got to check this guy out. He's one of us. That's exactly what she said, air quotes, he's one of us. And I reached out to you and quickly found out you are one of us. So thank you for helping me kick off my new Wisdom Wednesday series on my podcast, Small Changes, Big Shifts. So hey, everybody, I'm glad you're here. If you want to interact with me, I can see you on Zoom. I cannot see you on Facebook, but Eleanor's monitoring that. So I have the chat open. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'll get to them as I can, and we'll wrap them up at the end of the show. If you have a chance to put on your faces, I love seeing faces. So, hey, today's guest is James Beck. He's an author, wellness workshop facilitator, keynote speaker, and culture coach. His why began with an abusive father, which defined James Beck's childhood. It was a relationship his dad eventually chose to confront in order to break their cycle of generational dysfunction. What a perfect time for generational dysfunction discussion. After experiencing the benefits of this relational transformation through his father's service, Beck began to feel priceless. Beck, I remember watching your TED Talk, so I'm getting emotional sharing this. Beck spent 10 years writing his father's story so he could share the lessons that helped transform their relationship in his books. Hey, Dad, in his book, Hey, Dad, Remember Me. After finishing the book, Beck created a pay-it-forward social project to test his theories of breaking patterns of generational dysfunction on a national scale. There's more to the bio, but I want to get started with our time together. James, talk about that moment, that one moment that really shifted your father's perception. I think you know which moment I'm talking about.
Yeah, when I was 11 years old, I approached my dad and I told him that I had tried to commit suicide and he asked me, he's like, why would you do that? And I told him, because I thought your world would be better off without me. And I thought the entire world would be better off without me, because I was always told what a stupid, worthless person I was. And no matter how hard I tried, I could never get over that. And I'm like, well, if I can't get over that, if I can't have any value in the world, then it seemed like suicide, or one of my father's guns, was the best way out.
Wow. How did he respond?
When I told him about the suicide attempt, at first he was shocked. And it was the first time he didn't have a quip or didn't yell or push back. And he just realized that he was ruining his relationship with his family. And he went back, he just listened. And he was rolling, he slept on the couch that night because him and my mom got into a disagreement. And then he was wrestling back and forth with, why is it that every time, because my mother's aunt and uncle were marriage counselors. And so he went and was talking to them about what happened. He's like, why is it that every time I try to defend myself and say why I did what I did and prove that it was fine, why do you always tell me how I'm wrong and tell me how it's destroying my family? You act like I'm just like my mom and dad. And then he was like, oh my gosh, I'm just like them. I'm doing the same things to my son that was done to me, in the ways that I was destroyed as a child. I'm doing it to him. The next day he came to me and he said, son, what can I do? I want to change this around, and whatever I can do to change this around, I'm going to do it. I didn't believe him. And so as he approached me, I was backing up because I was expecting I just stood up to my father, and I was expecting a fist to fly because that was what I was conditioned to expect. And he said, he realized by me backing off that I didn't believe him. And he said, what's one thing that I can do to prove to you that I'm serious? And I was like, Dad, you'll never do it. And he's like, try me. And I said, I never want to work with you, around you, or for you ever again. And it's not because I don't like to work. I enjoy work. It was whenever I was around him, no matter, he wouldn't teach me how to do something. He just would expect me to know somehow right off the bat. And so when I didn't know, that anxiety and PTSD would churn in my mind, and that self-talk of being worthless, it would grip me. And even those feelings would ruin the experience. And so he said, okay, son, you don't have to. And then he would come to me every week and he would ask me, how am I doing as your dad? And he asked me to give him a grade, A, B, C, D, F. And so in a day and age where most kids don't find any intrinsic self-worth with their life, and that was my experience up to when I was 11 years old, all of a sudden my thoughts and feelings became valuable and important. So from being someone that's completely ignorant of what they feel because there's no intrinsic self-worth, I started becoming very fluent in how I felt and why things affected me in the way that they did because of this simple conversation. And over the course of about 7 years, it shifted from this very traumatic PTSD experience to where we grew a friendship.
Wow, it's just such a great story and so prevalent right now. And James, when we had a pre-call, I mentioned the Hoffman process to you. And do you remember that?
Yes, yes.
And had you heard about the Hoffman process before I mentioned it?
No, you were the first person that showed me it.
Well, it's interesting. We actually have had Frank Ferrante. We've had several people through this Rhythm and Resilience series that we did to kind of get through April, to be totally transparent. That's what we were doing, was getting through it, but we got through it with some of us more grace than others. And oddly enough, I reached out to Liza Ingrassi today. She's the CEO of the Hoffman process. And I said, now is the time. I need you on my show. So she'll be on, by the way, for all of you on June 24th. People need to talk about this generational change. I had no idea when we booked this call a couple weeks ago of what would happen in our country in the last week. And I believe the conversation needs to happen. And how do we talk about this generational? Just like a good lifestyle, and I know you're a health and wellness nerd like I am, just like drinking water starts from being a child, and eating vegetables starts from being a child, so does kindness, and so does empathy. So talk a little bit about generational dysfunction. What does that mean to you? Question number one. Question number two, how does somebody recognize it?
Well, first of all, before we start judging ourselves or our parents for having generational dysfunction or being mad at them for what they passed on to you, everyone's got it. Every parent has the lessons. We all as humans have the lessons we all need to learn. And whatever you didn't learn, those weaknesses, that's what you pass on to your kids, and also your strengths. And so it's not so much if I have it, but what is my path? What are those things that my parents put on my plate that was the normal thing growing up? So one of the things that my father is a fighter naturally. He loves a good fight. In fact, I think he taught me martial arts. We started doing martial arts so he could fight me and not get in trouble. But I grew up like fighting on our front lawn. And so there's a natural tendency when I approach a situation, because your father brings you your connection to the outside world, and your mother gives you your connection to your internal world. And that's basic psychology. And so when I approach situations knowing that, okay, this is not going to help if I just try to assert myself so much in the beginning, because sometimes it's not about you. It's not about your voice. And the best thing you can do sometimes is be silent and let someone else's voice shine. So knowing that that's an area of dysfunction that I have to focus on, but someone else, it may be the opposite. Maybe their father was very meek and wouldn't ever use their voice. So they struggle with actually finding the courage and stirring the courage to then speak out when they should speak out. So going through your parents, like, you know, it's like every trait they have is a positive and a negative. And so instead of looking at it as a positive and a negative, kind of assessing them to where it's neutral. Like my dad is a cheapskate. He's very, but then you can look at it, okay, he doesn't waste money on things unnecessarily, but then maybe he doesn't enjoy aspects of life that you should actually invest in. So not taking anything as a positive or a negative, but looking at it as neutral to say, okay, this is the power associated with that trait, so I can take it on. And then there is the path associated with that trait that I need to mitigate the challenges associated with that power. And so by taking a neutral approach, it calms everything to where it's like, okay, these are the dysfunctions associated with these types of behavior. Because our parents teach us right and wrong, and teach us good and bad. If they don't have, you know, a good handle on certain things that are good or bad, that passes on to us. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of racism is normal. It's because maybe our parents taught us that it wasn't a big deal, or whatever they teach, good or bad, it becomes our habit. And then we as children growing up, it's our duty to address that.
You know, you're taking me back to many years ago. Gosh, how old was I? 31. So, gosh, 23 years ago when I did the Hoffman process, I was really broken inside. And I remember sitting there and actually starting to develop self-compassion. And it's really hard to have compassion for your parents unless you start to develop it for yourself. And so as you start to develop it, that's another way to figure this out. But I remember at that point, at some point sitting there thinking, wow, I had my mother, my soul picked my mother so that I'd be having this conversation with James today. And hopefully somebody can say, oh my gosh, you know what, I can move forward, I can heal. Just because it's the way I was raised does not mean that that's the way my future's got to be. And I think that sometimes we have to figure out how to reprint. I'm going to go imprint. We're imprinted. Our parents do the best job they can from their parents, and then their parents, and then their grandparents, or great grandparents. And for me, the only person to be mad at was God. And so if I really believe in divine intervention, then I've got to let go of that. And I was actually at the funeral of one of my friends who's actually on this call today, his mother. And that was just a few years ago, and actually about this time of year. And I remember sitting in the back, James, and as they were talking about his mother, I realized that's who he is. And all of a sudden I thought, you know what, people say to me, I'm kind and et cetera, generous. And I'm like, you know, that's my mother. That's what she imprinted on me, even though I could see all the bad shit, you know, excuse my language, but that's bad shift. What happens is, and so I really love that we're having this conversation today. And I want to also talk about your experience in 2011, right? When you basically sold everything. Okay.
Didn't sell. I gave
Okay.
away.
You gave away everything. You had a party at your house, right? And your friends got to come get whatever they wanted.
Well, so there's an ancient Native American tradition to where when a tribal member wants to become an elder, they have what's called a potlatch party. And the more they give, the more honor they receive. So when I decided to take this journey, I decided to, like, okay, how do you become a new human? How do you become a new man? And so I looked through every book and every tradition, and I'm like, okay, what makes the most sense? And I tied my survival to this process, and a potlatch ceremony seemed to make the most sense. So you gather your tribe together, and then you give away everything. And so that removes any ulterior motive to speaking or leading, because you've already given every ulterior motive away. And so then they can now trust you. So yeah, I had a place down in Santa Monica filled with nice stuff. I had a business. I was a managing partner of a business in Beverly Hills. I gave away my practice. And I wanted to explore a different way of existing, because we in America, we live in a competitive economy. And that's more left brain, hierarchical. And there is another way to exist, which is a cooperative economy. And that is right brain. And it encourages the base versus one person being at the top and having this hierarchical system. It is the reverse of that. But I needed to explore it from as just immerse myself in it. And so that's what I did. I gave away everything I owned on April 1st, 2011. And then I went around the country and I served one family in every state. And 40% of them I knew and 60% were strangers. And now I usually, when I was doing it, I didn't explain why, but I had rewired my brain 3 different times. In the past, I'd removed shame, insecurity, and rage in different times. And there was kind of a system that as a hobby, I developed. And so in order to then do this, like face the one problem that I had never been able to tackle, and that was my PTSD, my anxiety, and it was crippling often. And so in order to do that, I had to induce the greatest state of anxiety that I could. It's kind of like when someone's scared of snakes, they put a bunch of snakes on them, and then they're finally, yeah. So I had to induce the greatest state of anxiety. And so the thing that scared me the most was to have nothing and have nothing. It's like I built this life in LA that looked cool. I had a business and I had some money, and to just be raw and nothing, kind of go back to that poor country boy that I grew up as, and who am I at my core. And then rewiring there's a part of your brain that's your reptilian brain, and rewiring that with my limbic brain, completely changing all the neurosynapses in my mind. And it takes 3 months just to, if you think of any type of rehab, it's 3 to 6 months, and 3 months to unwire, 3 months to wire. Well, I figured it's going to take me at least 3, 4, 5, 6 months to figure it out. So I just doubled it to a year. So going around, having a new environment, serving someone for 3 days. And a lot of times it was different races and ethnicities and socioeconomic statuses, and everything just had to be different. I mean, I would go to one home and they were like a Tea Party, hardcore Republican. And then the next place is a Democrat that's like very liberal. And to be able to turn your mind off and just say, how can I help you? And you get to where you start falling in love with people, with humanity, instead of thinking my ideas are more than, and instead of trying to be the teacher, trying to be the student. And there's 3 things that I really learned. One was appreciation, just appreciating every experience, even the pain, because a lot of times it's the pain that brings attention to the problem. And if even right now with all the protests and everything that are going on, if we didn't see the pain of someone, then it wouldn't stir that in our hearts and our lives to then say, no, this is wrong. So sometimes pain is exquisite and it reveals the problem. And then, having it be to where we're all connected. I mean, whether it be COVID, to where there's some random person on the other side of the globe, oh, what do they have to do with me? Nothing. No, now we know how how we're all connected. And then the last is cultivation. How not only do we need to cultivate ourselves, but also cultivating others. Like, what do we do to pass on, to make the world a better place? Because if that is the beauty of our humanity, is by what we give. When we make a living by what we earn, and we make a life and a legacy by what we give.
Give me the 3 words.
3 words are connected, appreciation, connection, and cultivation. I think the last one would be detachment. So appreciation.
Would that be the first one or the last one?
Appreciation would be first. Connection would be second, detachment would be third, and cultivation would be fourth. So that's more of if you look at the acronym, it's ACDC, relational currency. It's how to promote like relationships in your life. If you see people being appreciative, then that's someone you want to be around. If you see someone that's connecting, playing well with others, that's someone you want to promote in your life. Being detached from situations, making sure you don't have your own way all the time. But a lot of times the brilliance of others being able to grab and let everyone have their time to lead. And then cultivation, to where, one of the things that happened over quarantine is my wife and I moved into a new place, and we have a lemon tree. Now, we were gifted a lemon tree when we first got married. And I think it's like grows like one lemon every once in a while. But this lemon tree that we have at our new place has tons of lemons. And like learning that there's stages of life. And a lot of times, because we have social media and everything's so immediate nowadays, we expect to have everything at our fingertips right now, which in gardening, it's reminded me that there are stages. There's the planting, and then there's the growing, and then there's the harvest. So when you have kids, you have to have that time to where you're planting good information, and then you're growing them, letting them make mistakes. Pruning is important, the pruning the bad, and it's painful, right? To cut a branch. I mean, in one sense, there's damage there, but you do that so more fruit will grow. But then in the end is the harvest, and being able to sometimes reap the benefits. I didn't plant the lemon tree that I have now that's doing all these lemons. And the one lemon tree that I did plant, it really doesn't give that much. So being able to understand, and because a lot of times understanding cultivation, because a lot of times now it's like we'll plant something and then a week later go out to the ground and be like, you haven't produced fruit yet, this is worthless. And we judge it so quickly. But when we don't understand the phases of life, that is our shortcoming, not nature's.
Such a good reminder. You got to plant, water, plant, water, plant, water, plant, water, water, water. So good reminder. I want to go back to 2001. And if you don't mind, what decade were you in? Were you 18? Were you 25, 35? You had a successful business as a practitioner, I believe.
2011.
Yeah, but what generation were you in? Were you 20 at that time, 25? How old were you?
In 2001 or 2011 when I left?
2011, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was 35, turning 36. Okay. And there was a moment to where I got out of the shower and I went into my bathroom and I was looking at the mirror naked, and I looked at myself and I started chewing myself out. I said, you don't fool me. You fool everyone else, but you don't fool me. Mm-hmm. Because I was looking at my own life and I had a business and it looked enviable and I had a nice car and everything. And from the outside, people were like, oh man, you're rocking it. But my life was horrible. I was on call 24 hours a day with the business. I had no valuable existence, and what I was doing provided really no value. And just looking at myself, just saying, you are more than what you've become. And knowing that, like, if I had this idea, so I spent 10 years writing this book, Hey Dad, Remember Me. And it's like, if you have the knowledge of how to rewire the human brain, if you really believe that you have this, that you know this, then what are you going to do about it? Because if it just dies with you having it, did you really have it? Are you brilliant in your bedroom and that's it? Or are you going to throw down? And that was the moment to where it was December 1st, 2010. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give myself a month to think about this, because it's crazy. I mean, people don't just give away everything and travel the country. And usually when they're on the road, it's this, I'm trying to find myself, but I wasn't trying to find myself. I was trying to absolutely destroy the mind that my choices had made. And then from destroying my life, those things that were indestructible, the good things that make us human, that make us beautiful, only that would survive. And I wanted to sift everything else away, because how do you unlearn the generational patterns of dysfunction that were told to you and taught to you as being right by your parents when that's all you've ever known? So I had to kind of put everything on the chopping block, and I decided I was going to embrace every piece of wisdom I could get my hands on. It didn't matter if it was fiction, nonfiction, didn't matter what religion it was. I mean, Yoda, do or do not, there is no try. Like, that was one of the sacred things that I held on to. But there's a scripture verse that says all the laws and all the prophets can be summed up into loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and loving the neighbor as yourself. And I'm like, you know what? I'll put everything aside except that. And the best thing that I understand God as is truth, light, and love. So where truth things that can stand on their own, that don't need a narrative, that don't need words. You can just look at it and having that be true, having words be absent. Light, things that don't have any hidden angles, things that are just out there for you to see. And then love, that which you do experience and stirring that warmth within the heart, kindness, patience, being able to give your time and service. So everything else was on the chopping block. And then however I could grab something. I mean, Ben Franklin said, visitors like fish go bad after 3 days. So I thought, okay, I'm going to spend 3 days with the family in every state. So I made sure that I made no decision whatsoever, but I took all the wisdom that I could from either people long ago or recent past, or, even, having, like, I remember when even giving away everything, my roommate at the time, I was talking to her and I said, what should I do with all my stuff if I'm going to go on this journey? And I promised when I prayed, I promised that I would do everything that was placed on my heart without question or resistance. And my roommate said, oh, you should give everything away. And I felt this pull and I'm like, and so, but then I felt like, okay, if I'm truly going to follow my heart, then yeah, you have to do things that the mind, it doesn't make sense and it freaks you out. But that's the point, is to do it even to the point to where it's uncomfortable, because how do you rewire your mind into becoming a new person? That's just what I wanted to do.
So that's 2011. We're in 2020. So it's 9 years ago. So is that correct?
Yeah. So I had a business in Beverly Hills. I was the managing partner of a post-surgical recovery facility. And I worked with all top plastic and orthopedic surgeons in Beverly Hills and some bariatric.
In Beverly Hills. So we all know where that goes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Most of it was plastic surgery. And so, it was elective procedures. And on the weekends, I was the therapist for The Biggest Loser. NBC's The Biggest Loser. And so I was, working all the time. But as far as a manual therapist, I mean, working for an NBC TV show, it was like, hey, I kind of got it. And realizing that I had to give up that and give up the business. And there's a story in the Bible about the rich young ruler, how it goes to Jesus and, what must I enter the kingdom of heaven? And it's like, follow the laws of the prophets. Oh, I did that since I was a kid. He's like, oh, okay. You think you're so bad? No, this is me paraphrasing it. You think you're gonna do this? All right. Give away all your stuff. And he says, follow me, but it was walk in this way of service and helping and serving and giving and loving. Exist in that. And then you'll understand, and then you'll see God. And the guy was like, hung his head. He's like, oh, no way. And I thought, what have I ever really done to throw down? And, you study things and you call yourself a label of so you hold some religious tenet, but really, like, I hadn't done anything that was meaningful. I mean, and so I thought, if I really wanted to understand what faith was like, then instead of looking at things as obligation, what if I looked at it as ability? What if by doing something, it would enable a part of me to come alive? And that is what I found. And so people sometimes ask me, would you suggest other people to do this? And I'm like, no. I don't want the responsibility of someone else not going the distance, because it takes willpower because you can't stop. Because when you're in the frying pan, you don't take a nap. I mean, going 1 year nonstop serving, there's so many times that I was just worn out and I wanted to stop, wanted to take a break. But the point is, to rewire the mind, you have to keep going through the exhaustion to get to the other side. And only on the other side, once you go through it, once you've rewired the mind and kind of break through in this new, it's almost like going through the surface of the water to where you can't breathe and you're trying to get to the surface. You have to breach the surface of the water before you can take that new breath and that new life. And it took me 6 months. when I was going around the country, I had tremendous anxiety. I chewed up the inside of my cheeks. People would, when I go to their home and they'd be like, hey, we're going to have Mexican food and spicy. And I'm like, because my cheeks were all chewed up and it hurt so bad to eat. So I dropped down to, like the lowest weight I've ever been. I was probably like 145. And because I had so much anxiety. But by the midway point in my journey, I was like 198. And it was like, I was like getting all fat because I was eating every opportunity that I could because I didn't know if it was going to stop. And part of this was a test, not just for myself, but humanity and my understanding of God. I'm trying to rewire everything and figure it out. And then once I realized, okay, I was in this scarcity mindset of survival. And now I shifted to where it's fine. If you are good to people and you allow openness, honesty, and transparency to reign, and your acts are beautiful and you treat people equally, you're fine. And people open up their world to you. And so I had it was the first time this little girl, I was in Maine, and this little girl came up to me. I helped serve this local community group. This girl found out what I was doing, and she's like, tugged on my shirt, and she's like, hey, mister, what would happen if you don't make it to all 50 states? And at that moment, it was the first moment that I realized I don't have anxiety. I'm actually at the tipping point, just as far out of the forest as I was coming in. And I was like, well, then I'll be dead, because I'm going to make it. If I have breath, then I'm going to make it. And sometimes it takes that type of resolve. And that's one of the beauties that I see in humanity today, is even when there is opposition and there is threats of violence, that the peaceful protesters, the people that are risking everything to say, hey, listen, this injustice, no matter what, we're staying, and they're bending a knee and saying, we need for this to change. And some leaders are listening to that because of the peaceful nature of what they're doing, and kind of invoking those ancient ways of the people of past generations, of the way that they invoke change, like during the civil rights movement. Like, it was the peaceful ones that actually got things done.
So much great information today. Hey, to our followers that are live with me on Zoom right now or on Facebook, if you have questions, now's a great time to put them in the chat section so we can get those. And if you have any love and wisdom that you'd like to share back with James that I could share for you at the end of the show, please follow that. James, have you heard of the book Love Languages, 5 Love Languages?
Yes.
What's your love language? I'm curious.
Acts of service.
Yeah. Hey, here's why I'm going, because I'm a service person too. And I'm going, if somebody was maybe a touch person, this may not be the route for them. I'm curious now, thinking about, because some people after the show may say, you know what, I'm ready for a shift and I'm going to go do something of service.
Well, I think when you look at the love languages, I think it's important to speak all 5, because only when you're fluent in all 5 can you develop relationships across the board. My sister is a time spent. Well, when you serve, you are spending time. The danger of time spent is you're giving and receiving love at the same time. Now, the other person might not feel the same way. Acts of service, that, being able to give, there's a weakness to that too, to where sometimes someone will be like, hey, just spend time with me, just sit with me. You quit doing all these other things, gifts given. You can think, oh, it's beautiful. My mother is great at gifts given. The most sentimental, meaningful gifts I have are from her. However, then someone's like, okay, are you just trying to buy my feelings off, or substitute a gift for actually dealing with an issue? And then you have physical touch. It can be dangerous because you can avoid problems without actually doing it. Now, time spent, physical touch, gifts given, acts of service, and then words of affirmation. Words of affirmation, talk is cheap. Come on, show me the goods. Don't just use your voice. So it's really important, I think, with the 5 love languages, that you work and not just exercising your own natural love language, but enjoy exploring the other love languages, because then you're able to fully grow every relationship.
That's awesome. So on this show, we have Word Nerd, 4 things we like to do. We like to celebrate, guide, connect, which provide hope. And James, we're celebrating you and having the courage to gift everything and go on a walk with your faith, a walk with our community. And so we're celebrating you. You've given us some guidance about really, appreciation, connecting, detaching, cultivating. I think that's the magic of the show today. If you're struggling right now, I think that if you really attach to those 4 words and really understand those, I think you will shift your life. James, I want to go to the questions. I've got about 10 more questions, and we're going to have time for probably about 3. And so as I ask these, kind of think about more of a kind of a popcorn question, okay? Because I really want to hear a story too, so that could be longer. But Liz is asking a question, and this will go to the story. How did you find families to serve in each state? And once again, you're going to watch the TED Talk. We're going to put that in the show notes for you. We'll put James's website, how you can learn more about him. If you are not digging this conversation today, I want to come check your pulse, maybe check your oxygen level, because James is spot on in the place that we're talking about for the world. And this is not just about what's going on, the COVID, finding rhythm, but it's just, there's so much bigger than that. Okay, how'd you find people in every state?
So each state was different, but I went in phases to where the very first thing I did, I went to all my friends on Facebook and I said, hey, speak now or forever hold your peace, because I didn't want people like, hey, why don't you invite me? And I'm like, I did, and you didn't respond. So, put it out there, and probably 8 people that I served across the country were from that original invitation. And then I wanted to serve different people that connected with my life. So I chose one person from my mother's side, one person from my father's side. So my cousin that I served was a little estranged, hadn't been connected to the family. I served her in Minnesota. And then my mom was an RN. She worked ICU, CCU, detox, and for neurology clinic. Well, her roommate in nursing school, I served her and her husband in Missouri. But I wanted to make sure that the majority of the people that I served were strangers, because I didn't want people to think, oh, he's just hanging out with friends. So 60% of the people, I had no idea who they were. So one of the tools that I used, there's a website called Couchsurfing. And it's a way that I had invited people to stay on my couch when I was living in Los Angeles. So I had a good profile that was, okay, this guy's trustworthy and nice, but I had never done it myself. So I used that as a way to connect to people. It's like, if they're willing to let me stay on their couch for free, then they would appreciate me just giving them 3 days of service. And also I was able to make sure that I was safe and that everything would be a good experience. So I wanted to make sure at least 4 states where I had no connection and it was just through technology. I served 4 Biggest Loser contestants because I worked on the show for 5 seasons. And I wanted, that was a beautiful part of my life is experiencing their transformation through that process. But I also, probably the most significant thing that I was able to do was explore the 6 degrees of separation through the selfless giving of time. So being able to serve one person that had no connection with anyone else, and then they would set me up with another person, and then they would set me up with another person. And when you have that type of connection, there's no falsifying it. Like, a stranger's not going to lie for you. They're not going to go out of their way. They're going to say the truth no matter what the truth is. And if you truly are just good and let that goodness just sit there and grow, then, like I said, the world opens up to you. Right now, a lot of people are fearful, like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What if things fall apart? Well, at this point, I literally have 30, 40, 50 people in every state like, hey, if you ever want to come back, stay here and stay as long as you want. It'd be awesome. Why? Because I give more than I take. And I already have that reputation. And so if people cultivated that reputation by making sure they give more than they take, then they don't have to worry and be in that stressful scarcity mentality.
It makes me think of LTRs. Have you heard of LTRs?
No, you're introducing me to a lot of things.
Well, lifetime relationships. And
okay.
And just like how we met once again is you had the Be Good People shirt on. My friend Chris saw that. Then she researched you and you didn't know Chris at all. I'm not sure you even met Chris yet. So Chris, we're giving you a shout out right now. And she said, like I said, this is one of our people, right? And so, and I value her because she's an LTR for me. She's a lifetime relationship. Right. And that's somebody who shows up for you. And what you're saying is you showed up not only for other people, but you show up for yourself. I think you got to really learn to put that mask on yourself first. And then it's be a go-giver, and we had Bob Burke on the Small Changes, Big Shifts podcast. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He wrote the book Go Giver. And then it's really, kind of celebrate each other and then do some one-on-one so you can get to know each other's hearts. And so I have a feeling I'm going to have a new little brother. I have no little brothers. I have some big brothers. So I have one little brother, my friend Paul. So we'll call you, I'm adopting you, James. Not that you need adopted, but I'm adopting you today. So James, question for you. What's the relationship between serving and healing?
That's a great question. So serving is when you turn off your mind and just give of your time. There's a disconnect to your time, ownership. This is my time. I deserve this rate. No, here you go. And you have a segment that you give to someone. Healing, I believe that's where you create a purpose to your pain. And a lot of times when we experience great pain and we don't know why, we become victims to that pain. But when you can turn it around and have purpose behind it, and I'll tell you a very personal thing. Growing up, my parents had a foster home, and I grew up with a bunch of foster kids. And so anything that can happen to a kid in a foster home happened to me. And so I had to wrestle with that. And that was the rage that I had to overcome, and the feelings of worthlessness when you have violations happen to you. But later on in life, when I was able to talk to different people and some names of some different women came to mind, and they're like, you don't understand, James, like I was raped. And I'm like, unfortunately I do. And being able to give something beautiful to them and help them in the way that I was able to help myself by helping others through that situation. I could never serve people that are dealing with that if I didn't experience that. So being able to have appreciation for everything, even the horrible things of life, knowing that everything is perfect the way that it is, when you don't push away pain, but it's like, was my experience, and how do I use this to serve others? Then by using that to serve others, that's what creates the healing in your own life. As you reach into someone else's heart to try and serve them and help them, it actually heals your own self.
I'm going to put air quotes, ditto around that. Ditto around that. This is a great time if you have questions to put them in the chat box as we start to go to the last 15 minutes of our show today. Such wise wisdom here today. James, I want you to tell a story. First of all, what part of Kansas were you in? Because I'm recording.
Harrington, Kansas. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell us a Kansas story of somebody you served.
Oh my goodness. Kansas is flat. I had no idea. I saw some grain silos, and I was like, are they ever going to come closer? And then they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they were huge. I didn't have no idea how big they were. So the family I served in Kansas, they had a small business, a Frisbee golf business, and I helped not only with their business, but also they were trying to figure out how to launch and grow what they had created. So I helped create a new product line, and it's like, this is a way you can do it, and it was one of those things to where it kind of brought the family and the brothers together and the parents together. Sometimes when you just have an outside person that is just connecting to everyone, it kind of, a lot of the friction that typically would frustrate a family just kind of melted away. I with Kansas, the father took me out and kind of taught me some things. So it taught me how to, in business, taught me his way of business. And so it was one of those beautiful moments of maybe my father wasn't able to teach me or didn't spend time investing in me in that way. And I felt like, and this man that has these sons that are all working together and they're building this together, he was able to then take me aside and serve me. And he appreciated my input and they liked it, but then was able to serve me in how to grow my own mind as a man. Hey, this is how you treat your sons. This is how you raise them. This is how you interact with them. And then I'm, writing notes in my own mind. Oh, okay, that's much different than I experienced, but that's much better too.
Hmm. So we could just go on and on. Here's another question. What did you learn from living off donations? Because you didn't ask for money.
Correct.
And you went with no money. I mean, you had a little bit of money. How much money did you start the trip with?
It's hard to say an exact figure, but on state 4, I did look at my bank account and I had $120. And I made sure that when people asked me like, hey, and they're trying to offer money, that I didn't take it. So people were offering me, and this is one of the things that I learned to love about women, because the women that I served, they would call me like, 1 or 2 times a month. Do you need anything? Do you need some more money? And it's like, no, I'm testing humanity. I'm testing myself. I'm testing my concept of God. Don't ruin the test. So the fact that these people were constantly saying, hey, I want to make sure you finish your trip. Anything you need, let me know. And it taught me that we're enough, that this way of being is enough. You can live in a state of giving. It's a different way of thinking. Can you repeat the question? Because I think I might have answered it a little bit, but then I got sidetracked in my answer.
Oh, I'm so into the conversation. I don't remember the question. No, I'm sure Eleanor can tell me. But let's go to a more questions. So once again, 4 words: celebrate, guide, connect. How can people connect with you?
Well, if you want to go to beckbalance.com, BECK balance.com. I believe in balancing body, mind, and spirit. So we're talking about the work that I did to balance my mind. Now, the work I teach people into balancing the body is I wanted to create something to give back to my profession. So I'm a manual therapist, and my wife worked at March Air Force Base. She was the chief of safety. And so as the spouse of a military spouse, I would go on base all the time, and everyone had SI dysfunction or sacral iliac dysfunction, where the hips, the sliding joint doesn't work and it throws the whole body off. And I'm a structural integrator. And I've taught that for a while, but being able to do it myself, and, these guys couldn't pass their PT test and couldn't, maybe if I didn't balance them so they could run, and then they were worried about providing for their families. Well, if I didn't work on them, then some of them wouldn't pass. So how could I create it to where everyone can balance their own pelvis through self-care? So I worked since 2016 to 2020 on how to balance the pelvis in 3 steps. And anyone can do it, whether it's a manual therapist. It just takes care of this one problem very quickly and efficiently, for whether people are chiropractors or massage therapists or physical therapists, and even trainers and yoga instructors. Like, if they use these 3 tools in this way, then they can balance the pelvis in record time and remove this root cause of not only back pain, but limiting energy flow. And so that's the one big thing that I wanted to empower not only therapists, but also it's a self-care thing that other people can learn to use these techniques on their self to balance their own pelvis before they go into any type of treatment, which exponentially increases the value and the brilliance of what their therapists do.
Awesome. So they can find out more about that at beckbalance.com.
Beckbalance.com. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, this show, James, you may remember I'm a chiropractor, but I practice this whole person health model around the quadrants of well-being: mechanical, chemical, energetical, psycho-spiritual. So once again, why you're a perfect fit for the show today. Okay, we're going to start to wrap up the show. Really, if you have any more questions, now's the time, because I'm going to keep on going. What's been your biggest challenge during quarantine life?
Well, losing my business and my wife losing her job and having her cry on my shoulder and not knowing what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And keeping my mind focused and calm and creative, it's a struggle. And but being able to also have the tools of breathing right and calming yourself and techniques in order to do that. And I think growing up in a foster home, you know, I'm kind of used to fearing for my life. And so it's kind of like, welcome home. So, you know, it makes it a little easier to go back into that space. But, you know, having your wife cry on and having the future be uncertain, that's tough.
What's been the biggest gift of QL, quarantine life, not quadratus laborum? I knew you did that.
Well, really spending time with my wife and being able to appreciate her as my partner. She is the structured one and she plans like no other. I'm the creative one, and understanding that as I honored her above what I thought, it actually accelerated my growth and the furtherance of, you know, being able to put my program. I did this pelvic balancing course live, and from January, February, March, and you know, I'm like, oh, and it's growing, it's going great. And then all of a sudden everything hit and everything wiped out. I've been working on it 4 years. Well, by engaging my wife and having her guide me into structure, which is necessary for technology. That's why I was so like, oh, you conquered technology with this whole thing. That's great, because that's what I've been working on. But really being able to appreciate, and again, going back to that word appreciation, appreciate my spouse, and which has grown my marriage. And so my marriage is better than it's ever been.
That's awesome. Hey, if you had a magic wand, what would you do?
If I had a magic wand, when I finished my trip around the country, I developed a system by which other people could have the same transformational process. And I worked with, you know, a few people like, okay, what would it cost to code this, to make this to where other people could have the same transformation? And I figured out that it would cost about $200,000 as far as to code it for a platform for other people. And so I would just say, have that be done, especially now with all the 2020 grads and all the difficulty that they're experiencing, and having those transformative experience taken from them. Like, how can I, you know, provide a tool to where they can improve and rewire their own mind, optimize their own mind for themselves. So that transformational tool, I would say, boom, and have it be done.
Well, I would absolutely love that. So we talked about celebrate, guide, connect, and hope. You know, you've given us a lot of hope today and a lot of heartfelt conversation. So thank you for that. People know how to find you at beckbalance.com. Eleanor, thanks for taking great notes. For those of you that are new joining us, we'll put out, you can actually go to our website and you can log in to get the special invite to join us on Zoom. Once again, we are on Facebook Live as well. However, if you want the show notes, I don't know about this. This is the first time we've done this live. I guess the show notes will be up on the website. I don't know where that's going to go, but hey, you'll find out here in the next few days as we're being totally transparent. James, thanks again for joining me. Thanks for your heart. I'd love for you to stay on just for a few minutes to chat afterwards. Thank you again.
My pleasure. And I would like to give you one quote that helped me through the entire experience. And I think it would help other people right now with whatever they're going through, whether it be COVID or the protests. But it's a quote from Thomas Merton. It says, "Do not depend on the hope of results. You may have to face the fact that your work may be apparently worthless and achieve no result at all, if not perhaps result opposite to what you expect. As you get used to this idea, you start more and more to concentrate not on the results, but on the value, the rightness, the truth of the work itself. You gradually struggle less and less for an idea and more for specific people. And in the end, it is the reality of personal relationships that saves everything."
Without a doubt. Once again, James, thanks for joining me. To all of you, hey, we'll be here next week. We'll be here with Paul Long. Paul's a new friend. I just collect people. I was at the lake with a couple friends, just a few friends. I was not in that big Lake of the Ozarks that made national news, just to give you all. I was not in that. I'm still social distancing unless I'm at my office or with about 6 friends. And my friends Natalie and Susan recommend this guy named Paul Long. He's local in Kansas City. He'll be on the show next week. And he is a firecracker. And I know less about him than I do about James, because I watched James' podcast before. And then we'll be coming on, we'll have people from the Hoffman on. We've got a great summer lineup for you. I encourage you to join us. Feel free to ask any questions. Reach out to me if you need some support or encouragement or love. I want to share, James, this my quote for the week, and I want to tie it into what's going around in the world. And one of the things that I'm trying to figure out what to do, because people are asking me, what can I do in this time? And so here's my quote for the week. There are only two things you can control in this world: where you spend your heartbeats and your attitude. As you pay and spend money, as you pay and spend your time, as you pay and spend your text messages, social media, whatever it is. So speaking of social media, if you found something great on the show today, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share it. We're trying to reach 1 billion people. That small changes can lead to big shifts and change your life. And so as I think about, by the way, the last part of that quote is all else is an illusion. And that's by our guest today, James Beck. And as I think about what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the way I'm spending my money. And just recently, we had a little incident at my office. And when I look at the vendors, I'm thinking, okay, who am I bidding against? And even if it pays I have to pay a little bit more. I'm trying to figure out how to help support all people, all ethnicities. So think about how you're doing that. Think about, I was talking to my friend Ezzy Redwood today, who owns a company called Wings in town. They make great wings, and I'm not sure how healthy they are, but they're great wings. Friday is coming up after all. And how could I go and support different restaurants? I'm going to tell you, I'm bad. I go to my favorites right here in the hood, and I'm going to do everything I can to get out of the hood. And so, James, such a great reminder. So to all of you, hey, thanks for sharing with us today. Go out and do your best to make it a phenomenal day. I'm sending you all big heart-to-heart hugs. All right, chat soon. I sure appreciate you listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. If you go to the website, smallchangesbigshifts.com, we'll have the show notes ready for you there. If this episode inspired you to make a small change that will lead to a big shift, please share with a friend. You can catch our episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. And if you feel like it, please leave a rating or a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our episode next week. Blessings to you.